Thank you. Hello and welcome to the Art Spirit Gallery. My name is Blair Williams, and we are thrilled to have you here for another of our artist talks. Today, I am thrilled to introduce you all to one of our featured artists this month, Mike. And Mike, tell them the great trick on how to say your last name.
The great trick on saying my name is it's either Smith or it's accessory with a D, so it's DeCesare. If you see it written, it's DeCesare, but no one can say that, including me most days.
So Mike DeCesare is joining us today, but we love to give you that little trick. I'm going to give you a little bit of information and background on Mike, and then I'm going to get out of the way and let him take it away for you. Just a little housekeeping to remind you that in the back of the gallery and off to the right are our restrooms. We've got some water there in the tub for you. If you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand. We only do casual here, so we want you to be able to use this as an educational experience. So Mike's work explores the bonds between people and nature, each picture opening a window beyond the frame where you may find a memory you cannot forget or a memory you are inspired to create. The images are physical, but the imprints and interpretations are purely personal, as unique as each person willing to look through the window. I'm going to continue to describe Mike just a little bit more, but I'm going to tell you that that description is exactly what we see happen on the floor each and every day when people encounter his work on the wall. They just become ensconced in the work and often will describe how they see themselves either engaging in that place or that location or that photo. And that's really fun and exciting for us all. Mike began taking pictures as a child with a Kodak camera. And over the years, he tried to put photography aside, but it never worked. After all, there was life and responsibilities. Surely you know what he means. After a career in television and a few other stops always involving photography, there was no avoiding it. By now, digital was slowly, inextricably replacing analog, and he didn't like it. However, he knew and trusted medium format photography and film. Finally, it occurred to him, don't leave analog behind, rather take everything I know and love in film and apply it to digital, and so he did. While fine art photography is an art form, he believes that the craft behind photography, just like every art form, is grounded in competence and discipline. In the end, he wants his work to touch you in a personal way that rekindles a memory or inspires one. It is a window looking out into the world that may also mean looking inside your own world. So enjoy. Thank you, Mike, for coming to us today, and feel free to ask questions.
Thank you very much. Hello, thank you for being here and being online, watching. I'm not a fan of a wall of words, so I'm happy to stop and answer questions, whether they're specific. Oftentimes when I do a talk, someone will say, well, I have my camera here and I don't know what to do with it. So I'm happy to help on that score. But here's my fundamental belief as we begin this conversation. Everyone here, everyone watching, everyone outside on the street, everyone has the capacity within themselves to be an artist. There's no such thing as, well, they're down the hall and to the left. Having said that, there are commitments and responsibilities and things that must occur, in my opinion, along with that. But let me give you some overall perspective, because people get very concerned as they look at this as a profession. Last year, 5.3 billion photographs were taken around the world. That's billion with a B. And so you look at that and you say, there is no chance I'm going to have something different than 5.3 billion pictures, or I'm going to be any better, or whatever. I tend to try to think of things a little bit outside the box. There are 8.2 billion people in the world. So in my way of thinking, last year everybody took 1.5 pictures. So 1.5 pictures, you can compete with that. You can deal with that. You can bring your voice into that. 1.5 pictures, oh, come on. And that's the way I chose to see things and chose to begin my own transition, let's call it, from one world into another. The beginnings of photography are really quite straightforward. Light is everything. If there's no light, there's no photography. If it's pitch black, that's the end of that conversation. There's nothing there. So it requires a commitment to be what I call technically competent. And it isn't something that, you know, you watch a YouTube video and then you're good, or you pick up the Photography for Dummies book, which is actually quite good for as a starter, by the way, and that suddenly you're there. I'm a big believer in foundation blocks and commitments to go forward, because I believe that one of the distinguishing characteristics of any artist in any medium is the ability to replicate what they're doing, the ability to understand and push for, I want it this way, and know what they mean by that and know how to do it, not stumble into it, stumble across it. So for me, when I made the full commitment to jump, I actually enrolled in the New York Institute of Photography and went to school and graduated not, they don't do a degree, they're a trade school basically, because in a way, photography is a trade. But what they drilled into me and everybody else was the technical competence, so that I could take, in any condition, I could take a picture. Whether I wanted to, whether it was called fine art, whether it was called whatever it was called, didn't matter. It was, I could deal with the technical aspects of this medium, of which there are many. Fine art photography, I do landscapes, but fine art photography can apply to portraits, macro photography. There are some beautiful macro artists in photography. So while I define myself via, in terms of fine art photography, via landscapes, others define it completely differently, and it all fits, if you will, in that criteria. Let me give you some very brief background, because I think it helps set up what I'm really talking about. The human eye can discern 21 stops of dynamic range. I came out of the film world. Slide film, which everyone loved at a certain point if you were into that world, the best slide film could do was 7 stops of dynamic range. Color negative film, the best it could do was about 10 stops of dynamic range. So that's less than half of what your eyes can perceive. So you've got this massive cutoff to begin with. Digital photography, in the current state of the technology, with some cameras can see 16 stops of dynamic range. The difference is extraordinary in what it's capable of seeing, what you're capable of visioning with that expanded dynamic range. So mastering everything from exposure to lens selection, up and down the sort of the chain of events, let's call it, all requires knowing what it is you're trying to do, what it is you're trying to achieve. When I made the transition, I, with abandon, went after every assignment I could possibly get. Anything and everything I took, because it made you technically better, if nothing else, and it gave you more and more ability and time to realize your own vision and create your own vision. And part of that is you begin to separate as you become technically better. You begin to both appreciate not only photography, but other art forms, other two-dimensional art forms, because of some of the similarities. But you also begin to understand that a lot of what you hear and see is simply either untrue or not as true as it should be. Case in point, if you have a camera, and probably everyone here does at some level, you will hear people say, well, aperture controls depth of field. If you want a deep depth of field, i.e. what's in focus on your picture, then you just crank your f-stop to say f16 or f22, and boy, you're there. Problem with that is aperture is only one of the 4 things that control depth of field. And nobody, unless you're a professional, usually talks about the other 3, but there are 3 others. And so unless you have, in my view, sort of the formal kind of grounding, you don't know that. And so people will end up and I've seen this a lot with very expensive camera gear, taking very bad pictures because they don't really know what it is that they're doing. Or they've heard a piece of something, but you go, well, there's 3 other pieces that influence this particular aspect of it. And so when you're trying to do it as I am and other professionals in this sort of vein, then you need to know to do that. Every camera has 3 basic settings, and you can mimic the same thing on your phone, which is aperture, shutter, and what's called ISO, which really stands for, in digital, the amplification on the sensor. There's a relationship between the 3, and let me show you what that is. This is called the exposure triangle, which fell down. The exposure triangle, one side is shutter, one side's aperture, one side's ISO. The fact of the matter is, for proper exposure, if you change any one of these sides, you must change one or both of the other sides to maintain the proper exposure. If you don't, you wander off into the woods. So, and there's a reason you would change one of these settings. For instance, an awful lot of people today who have kids in school and on teams, sports, they want to go to the game, they want to get a picture of their son or daughter playing whatever it is they're playing. So they take the camera, they don't really know how to use it, they put it on auto, and things don't go well. Because on auto, the camera is going to look for exposure from an aperture point of view unless you change it to shutter speed and then change the shutter speed to compensate for the movement on the field or the court or the whatever. A camera without any such changes is going to shoot at sort of native shutters of like 1/25th of a second, which is not enough to freeze action. And so if you have this all done, and you have the ISO at the native of the camera, but you want more out of it, you can change that, but you have to keep all of this in proportion or your exposure will go wrong. Or worse, in my opinion, when it goes right, you won't know why. And to me, that's even worse. If you stumble onto something that's really good and you go, I have no idea how I got here, then you miss tremendous opportunities. So there's the technical aspect of it. The other aspect of it is when you look at a frame, when you look through a viewfinder or you look even on your camera on the phone, you're creating a world, a window in which you're inviting me and others to look into that with you or through you. Truth of the matter is, the way we perceive things as humans, we've all played tic-tac-toe. Tic-tac-toe is one of the most fundamental ways of composing a picture in a camera. It's widely used. It's one of about 10 different setups you can do to take your viewfinder and break it down into something so that you'll get a better composition, especially starting out. For instance, the reason these have marks on them is what we know from visual research is if you put the subject not in the middle, but at any one of these points, and you'll have a more dynamic composition. It's as simple as that, and let me show you. Here's a really beautiful picture. Can you imagine if the photographer had put her here? It just would fall apart. It just would lose all of its, I mean, I think, if you can sort of mentally remove the red, this would be a beautiful picture. Just beautiful pictures, just very, very human. But that's what happens if when you marry up compositional techniques into the real world. You end up with really nice pictures versus starting here and then going, oh, Well, that just didn't work. And it goes back to what I said at the very beginning. Everyone has the ability and the capacity to do art. If it's photography, then all the more, where you can use these sorts of things to keep yourself in mind. For me, these sorts of techniques were fundamental in the courses that I took at the New York Institute. They just pounded it into your head because they believed that if you don't know what you're doing, then you can't really call yourself a professional, or you can't do a job. Especially when you're going to charge someone money and you show up and you really don't know what you're doing. So, but the journey to fine art is not really linear, unless people are independently wealthy, which few are. A transition into fine art photography means a transition. And I call it a glide path, that you are going to have to make a plan and say, if I want to get to there and I'm over here, I can't just jump there because there's like, the electric company won't be excited about me not sending them money. So I ended up chasing and developing in every single area of photography, from portraits, which are they're really challenging, but they're really fun. They just really are. They're very special, and there are some portrait photographers that will just knock you on the floor. They're just so incredible. To those sorts of things, to commercial photography, where XYZ company needs this, whatever it is, headshots of executives, products, whatever. And you end up taking all of those because one of the career paths that you learn in school is it doesn't happen all at once. And frankly, even if someone was independently wealthy and they didn't have to worry about the money side of it, you would still miss out on a tremendous number of not only opportunities for making money, but for growing. Working with a client, working with a customer. The person or persons who hire you to do a portrait or portraits is going to be different than the company who hires you to do headshots or around the office sorts of thing. And to be able to navigate that successfully is both rewarding and challenging in the same time. But learning how to do that and understanding that you can't turn in bad stuff. I had a company in a different city hired me to come in. They were the company was in the company had an office in the Northwest. They were headquartered on the East Coast, and the assignment was this: between 10 and noon, you can shoot. We must have the pictures finished and uploaded to us on the East Coast no later than 2 o'clock Pacific time. So I had the breakdown at noon, and I had 2 hours to process and deal with every image and upload them to the corporate headquarters on the East Coast. And at exactly 2 o'clock, I pressed upload, and not 5 seconds later, there was an email from the head of the marketing group saying, it's 5 o'clock. Where are the pictures? And I said, they're uploading right now, so don't bother me. But I mean, those are the kinds of demands you can be put under, which in the end are actually, I find them exhilarating because of the challenge of it. Because I was told going into this particular shoot, they're not kidding. They're very difficult, they're very demanding, and they're not kidding when they say that. By the same token, I chose to take that and say, well, you know, in a way, The same is true in fine art landscape photography. And what I mean is, if you've shot any number of pictures at all, any number, you know instinctively, if not intellectually, things change pretty quickly. I mean, if you're taking whatever, sunset, whatever, pick something that you just like, and oh, that's very pretty. It isn't going to be there 90 seconds later. It's going to be either gone or completely different. And so I go back to that, it must be here by, at 2 p.m. you better be uploading. It's the same frame of reference of I have to work quickly and efficiently and effectively because in 90 seconds, the sun is going to be gone. That piece of light that like on misty morning, that lasted not even 60 seconds. And then it was gone. Gone, completely gone. And you say, and it's never coming back. That, the way that is, will never be the same again. So I chose to sort of, to as part of my upbringing, if you will, was to take all these myriad experiences and fold them over on each other and say, there really is something to be applied from the difficult corporate client to the difficult shooting conditions for this particular landscape. They actually are more similar than not, is what it amounts to. And by doing that, then I could incorporate more and more and more, and I think grow faster than perhaps otherwise. Question that often comes up is, well, okay, so you made the transition, but what did it take to do that? And here's a hugely important thing. Start where you are. I hear over and over and over again, people say, well, if I went and bought your camera, that'd be it. And you go, well, actually, it wouldn't be it. But I started with a lens that cost less than $75. It was a hell of a good lens. Less than $75. And people, I want to sort of dispel the notion that you have to have the best of all the equipment before you can start your journey. That is simply not true. And in fact, starting where you can, starting with what you have, has tremendous advantages actually, because what you realize is you learn what your equipment is capable of doing and why, and then when you need to upgrade, why you're doing that, exactly why you're doing that. My $75 lens has been replaced with a $3,000 version of the same lens, the same length. It does very different things. But let me give you another case in point. I have, God knows how much lighting equipment, lights, softboxes, all sorts of lighting modifiers for my work. I shot this the other day, the bunny, with a $6 piece of foam core. That was it. $6 piece of foam core produced a nice picture. There will be those who will say, well, but you had enough natural light, you could pull that off. And it's like, okay. So I went to Home Depot and I bought a $12 light. And Bunny 2 is with a $12 light. And it's a nice picture. You don't need to spend $2,000. We can't tell my wife this, but you don't need to spend $2,000 on lighting equipment in order to get really nice work. When you start with what you have and you say, I don't have to feel bad that I can't afford the $2,000 lighting rig, when you realize that you don't, that yes, the day could come when you will need it and want it and use it, but in the beginning especially, you don't need to do that to come away with pictures that you'd be happy. I mean, this is a pretty big print. This is much bigger than anyone would normally print, and I did it on purpose to say, you can do that. You can have a nice outcome for hardly anything in the way of money. And people, online's a wonderful thing, but people misinterpret a lot of online in terms of what you can really do and not do and what you need and what you don't need. Speaking of online, the color space of the internet is substantially less than the color space of everything else. So my pictures, even the bunnies, are shot in the RGB color space, which is a very wide color gambit. The internet is what's called sRGB. It's about 2/3 of what RGB is. So what does that mean? It just compresses everything. And so nothing will look quite right or quite the same because it doesn't have the same ability to render online what you can see here or here on a print. And so while the internet's wonderful and on and on and on, the internet has, especially in visual arts, has some issues, some real issues. I've had people say to me, well, this looks so different in person than online. And you go, yeah, because there's 1/3 of it or 50% more in that sense, more of it here visually than I can show you online. It's just the way it is. It's just the nature of the internet. And it applies to anything. Any picture online has the same problem or the same issue, is the color space is just so much smaller that it's much more difficult. And that would be true of Denny's stuff, any of the paintings. It would be, the same would be true if we shot a picture of that and it looked beautiful, we put it online, it would not look the same. It would be slightly less vibrant, colors would be slightly less, because that's the nature of, it's the medium. It's literally the medium. So that makes it more and more difficult then to really showcase your fine artwork, because you know you're dealing with less than what I'd call a full deck along the way. For me, as Blair said in the beginning, I in one sense was sort of dragged kicking and screaming after I just said I have to do this. I mean, I just kept having things happen where it was like you really do have to do this. You really cannot ignore this any longer. And in a way, this is, despite the limitations of the color space of the internet, it's also a wonderful time because you have literally a global audience to look at, to look at your work and react to it and interact with it. That's good news and bad news for people who are selling online, because routinely work gets either stolen directly or indirectly, which is a huge problem and a growing problem online. So it makes it harder and harder for an artist of any medium, not just photography, to show in a good sense, a true sense online, because of that. Online, on my website, all of my pictures, have a watermark on them, which is totally annoying, right? Totally annoying, completely messes up. And the resolution of the pictures is so low to try to discourage image theft that I have people contact me and it's like, are you going to do a show anywhere near here? Because I really like this, but I need to see it. Because, and I readily admit it, and I readily will say that to them, believe me, I absolutely understand what you're saying. But there's no alternative to it because the work is being stolen regularly. In some way, shape, or form. Every morning over coffee, I look at the stats from my website from the day before, and when I see certain countries, you go, oh boy, here we go. We're in trouble now. Or someone will contact me, and in a very short period of time, you realize that it's all absolutely bogus. It's absolutely untrue, and they're just trying to get you to send them pictures at a better resolution or something like that. So it's never going to end. I mean, just yesterday, I think it was, or the day before, sometime earlier this week, Facebook's new policy came out, which said, if you put an image on Facebook, they can take it and use it. So up until 48 hours ago, I would sell quite regularly on Facebook. It's a more regional audience, so people could contact me and say, I really like that. How can we get together where I can see it before I commit to it or whatever? So we figure that out. So I scrubbed literally every single photograph of mine off of Facebook and Instagram, because they own Instagram as well, 2 days ago. Now trying to figure out how to replace that as a now we're back to sort of, it's a communications medium, not a sales medium, where I had sold regularly on Facebook over the last several years, because people could either buy it outright or they could say, I live here, you live there, that's pretty close. Could we get together and I could take a look at it and just confirm that I really like it or whatever, that sort of thing. So all things have a good side and a bad side, and trying to navigate what they are as a professional gets harder and harder. Everyone's dream is to be in a gallery like the Art Spirit Gallery. I mean, a nationally acclaimed gallery, recognized around the country. Here's the state of art galleries. In the entire United States last year, there were something like a little more than 51,000 art galleries. Basically 1,000 per state. Not very many when you think about big cities and so on, right? There are more pizza restaurants, by far, than art galleries. So it's a fragile and very vulnerable part of art in America today. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to get in, because when you do the math on how many artists of the various mediums are out there trying to get their work represented or shown and so on, you do the math. I mean, last year in fine art, in sculpture and oil painting and acrylic, new work only, there were 235 million new pieces made last year. So they're all looking for a home. And these are very fine artists. I don't get me wrong. These are not, whatever. So it gets very, very difficult. And so the question I often get is, well, then how do you do it? And the truth is, art galleries, being the smart people that they are, including Art Spirit, once a year, art galleries, many, not all, but many, will do a call for art for like a holiday show, where it's a lower price point. You don't have to be a known quantity. And it's an opportunity to get real feedback. I mean, it's incredibly difficult to say, well, I'm just going to walk in there and show them my stuff and they're going to love me. You go, well, it may be wonderful stuff, but that isn't the problem. The problem is they're overwhelmed with what they have. So for people who are looking to break in, saying, well, how do I do it? That's one of the ways you do it. You look for opportunities to either submit to a show, such as like a holiday show here, and there's holiday shows all over, as an example, and they typically will take 200 or 300 pieces. So so that's pretty darn good. In addition to that, and if you're going to commit to the fine art space, you have to put yourself out there. You have to. So you have to do shows. People just starting out, where some shows can cost, of the booth fee for many shows, can cost $500 to $1,200. So as I say, I'm underwater before the show opens. $500 to $1,200, as does everyone else who's showing. And that's pretty tough on a lot of people as they're starting out. However, in communities all over the place, libraries, restaurants, homes for seniors, there are a whole number of free opportunities to put your work up. Oftentimes, like a restaurant will, if they like your work, they'll allow you to show for a month. And if something sells, sometimes they'll take a commission. That's really to cover the transactional sales. Sometimes they won't. Sometimes they won't do anything. They'll say, if you want to buy that, you got to talk to so-and-so. But if you're starting out especially, there are an enormous number of opportunities to get into it, to do it, because there is a business side to fine art, in my case photography, in other cases sculpture, etc. And you have to know the business side of it. You have to understand that if you commit to a show and the booth fee is $1,000, they're not kidding. and then you have to make art for that, so that's going to cost you another whatever. So you could be talking easily about $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 of investment before the show, before any show even opens. So the management of that, the money management of that, is imperative, or you can't live, as I called it, long enough. Again, going back to the whole idea of just don't be in the equipment game. Not better equipment, yes, it can do all sorts of things, but you have to weigh, well, if I spend $3,000 on this lens, that's an entire show for me, both booth fee and production costs for work. I mean, I have the work like Misty Morning was made in a special lab, and so the way they make it and so on, it's a significant investment, and you have to be realistic about it. And the other thing about doing libraries, restaurants, all those wonderful opportunities is you may sell something, but you get a tremendous amount of feedback. And I find that terribly invaluable. You're trying to say, do I make sense visually in this piece, if you will? And I may think I do, but you may look at it and be stone cold about it. Which gets us to the bottom line. The ultimate question is, well, how do you elevate to fine art photography? And here's how I see it. What I call day-to-day photography is up here. It's technical, it's practical, it's pragmatic. There's usually a budget, there's usually a client or a customer. It all happens up here. To move on to create a tie happens here. You take this and you add this. When you add your heart into it, you're trying to visualize in that frame an emotional tie, an emotional connection that you feel authentically that someone else might feel. And then finally, the something else part of it is what I call the secret sauce, which is you have to pour yourself into it. You have to. You have to be willing to be rejected quite regularly. You have to be willing to be misunderstood. You have to be willing to be understood. You have to be willing to say, I've poured everything that's me into this piece. And then you watch and see if people make it their own. Art is so personal. You may really enjoy a certain piece of artwork, but almost in an intellectual capacity. To say, oh, I really like that, I like the competence of it, the whatever. But it doesn't move you enough to say, oh, I'm being pulled into that. What is happening here? Why is this pulling into me? Why is it calling me in? And how do I make it mine? I mean, in the end, for me, I'm quote unquote successful as a fine art photographer if one of my pieces is so compelling that you have to make it your own. You say to yourself, I can't not look at that and think of this in my own life or my own world. And that's when the connection's made, and that's when fine art, anything happens. Thank you. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Any questions?
Do you typically shoot raw still?
Always raw, and always on a tripod. RAW, for those who don't know, it's a digital negative, basically. And it allows you, with modern cameras, There's what's called JPEG, which would be a traditional picture. You see it right then and there. There's a whole bunch. JPEG's got a lot of great qualities to it. It also has a lot of downsides if you're trying to do something with it. So yes, I'll shoot. If I'm on like that, the situation I described on the 2-hour window, I'll shoot both. It'll do both RAW and JPEG. To say some of them, I can just take it as it is and go. Others I can work with. But it's a digital negative. I mean, I grew up with film. I developed film in dark rooms. I printed in dark rooms. I did all those sorts of things. And so RAW, providing a digital negative, allows you to emulate all of that all over again. So yes, absolutely. And tripod is, there's a level at which you say you got to do it. I mean, my camera, and most cameras now have anywhere from 3 to 7 stops of what they call sort of shake resistance. They have all different names for it, where they say, well, you can hold it and you can take a picture and it'll come out good. Not for me. That doesn't work. It only works. There are some places where you cannot use a tripod. You're not allowed to. And so in that instance, then you do some other things. That's where that exposure triangle comes in, where you say, well, if I, like a lot of churches, as an example, that are beautiful architecture inside, they will not allow a placement of anything. The Supreme Court in Washington, D.C., you cannot put a tripod out. The people with guns come very quickly. And so that's where, especially again, the exposure triangle happens. One last quick thing technically. Everyone's probably heard of the zone system in some way, shape, or form. Ansel Adams created the zone system almost 100 years ago now, probably 85 or 87 years ago, which is a technical treatise on proper exposure. And the zone system is 10 steps, 0 to 10, so 11 steps total. And something to understand about that is, if you indeed embrace photography and go more and more into it, is it was created at a time, the reason it's that many steps is, at the time, that was the technical capability of paper and film. So that's why it's, and there are, you read, if you get into this or study this or want more information, you will read people who say, well, it doesn't work anymore, which isn't true. But what they're really saying is, there's more dynamic range now that it in a sense doesn't account for. If you were a student of this in any way, shape, or form, you'll come across pictures and they'll show you all the zones in one frame. You go, oh, why is that picture so beautiful? Because you go, it's got every single step in it. And then some will come around and say, well, but if I've got 15 or 16 stops of dynamic range, then it's not going to show me all of that, which isn't really quite true. But that's how it came about. It was meant for the times of how to deal with what the actual capability of film at the time and printing materials at the time, what you could do in a darkroom with paper, which has gotten so much better, just so much better now. I don't print on photo paper. All my prints are on, it's all 100% cotton rag, which is a whole different thing. And cotton rag has, I don't know, 15, 16, 18 different sets of characteristics that make a difference on how a print ends up looking in truth. There are a couple of prints that just made me crazy to find the right paper. Because what I have to do is, I have big printers, but my printers have to match the lab that I use. So everything, all the calibrations that have to be done technically again, I have to make sure they match up with, probably my daughter. No, it's a scam call. They want to buy my pictures, but they don't really want to. They don't want to pay money for them. In order to do that. So I have to make sure that when I print something, if I print it at this size, printing it at this size shouldn't make a difference, right? I mean, it should be the same. And if it's not, there's something wrong. So I spend an enormous amount of time ensuring that whatever size it is. Like all my work is in editions of 10. There are only 10 of everything available before it's done. Well, number 1 and number 10 have to be the same. I mean, they have to look the same. Otherwise, you go, well, what the heck happened here? Or wait a minute, I bought number 6, but number 7 looks like this. What happened? So again, back to the whole technical aspect of it. I was really great at the time. I don't know about today, but when I went through the New York Institute of Photography, besides all of the coursework, they paired you up with a working New York City photographer. Mine was a brilliant portrait photographer. And you got a very thick skin really fast from him. But it wasn't like, it wasn't like he was trying to be mean or whatever to you. It was just like, if you're going to do this, then you're going to do this. And if you want to just, if you want to be casual about it, fine. It's really kind of, there's a point at which if you're good at something, like if it's photography, whatever medium, there is a point at which you say, I'm either going to be at this level probably for a long time, or I'm going to make a commitment and I'm going to go to the next level. And then what does that look like and how does that work? Any other questions? You're all going to run out and take pictures now? I'm curious, cameras or cameras or cell phones? What do you use most often? Cell phone. Cell phone?
iPhone.
Yeah, yeah. Phone?
Actually, I have a camera that requires film. Camera that requires film.
Oh, good. A medium format or?
I don't know. I got it for Christmas. I'm learning how to use it.
Oh, okay. Okay. So it probably has one of the pre-thing rolls, and you just throw you throw the thing in. You don't have to do the, oh my God, I got to wind this thing. And have you shot anything with it?
Yeah, like 11 photos.
And have you gotten them processed?
No, not yet. I'm taking notes on what I do for like settings.
Oh, good.
Once I go through all the film, I can get it developed and see what I did.
And do you have a light meter?
I don't know.
So you don't have an external one in this, in the camera?
I'm not sure. I'm barely.
Well, you want a light meter. I guess the bottom line is, whether it's in the camera or in your hand, and there are differences, you want a light meter. Every light meter, from a Hasselblad camera to a whatever camera, every light meter reads 18% gray. Now, they read it better. I mean, obviously, a very, very expensive camera has all sorts of algorithms and other logic that will recognize things. But oftentimes, people will say, well, I took a picture, the exposure was right, but the snow's gray. And you go, yeah, it's supposed to be. I mean, the camera, the meter reads it as 18% gray. So if it's pure white, or pure black for that matter, it will not render it pure white or pure black. So you have to make adjustments for it. So for a light meter. So light meter is all reflected light. In other words, it's taking a reading off of what's bouncing off, what's hitting this and bouncing off. Where with a handheld light meter, you can do that, but you can also do incidence meters and fill in flash and things like that. Gives you a lot more capability. Like my external light meter can trigger all of my studio lights, so I can really fine tune something because I'm holding the light meter, and I can say, all right, I moved this 7 inches, and boom, what happened to it, and what did that change? For instance, if you were going to shoot artwork as an example, you want the same meter reading all the way around. You don't want, the left corner to be f8 and the right corner to be f5. That's a problem. It's not it will not reproduce correctly for the artist. So individual light meters, and they're not very expensive. If you really get into this, you want to put that on your list of things to buy or whatever. That's interesting that you got a film camera. Did you ask for a film camera?
No. I just like photography. My parents bought it.
Nice. It'd be fun. I mean, I really did love. I did love film. And it sounds like you've done a lot of work. So,
Yeah, I've developed my own film.
okay.
Way back in the day. I'm
Yeah.
trying to get back into it. So,
Yeah, I have a friend.
I had a digital camera from 20 years ago, and I'm trying to upgrade. I have L lenses,
Oh, yeah, Canon.
so I want to keep that going.
Yeah.
So I need a modern camera. I just haven't bought one yet.
Yeah, yeah. I have a friend, a photographer in the Netherlands, who refuses to go digital.
Yeah.
He just refuses. And whenever we talk, I go, so has it happened yet? And he, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. And he's developed, what's interesting is, I mean, his thing now is, because he does a lot of commercial work, more commercial work than fine art work, although he's a wonderful photographer. And so now his pitch to corporate clients is, I'm doing it in analog. It really is different. And it does have a different look to it. You know, the other night I was in here and there were people during one of the sessions. And this one person was telling me, and he said, oh, I love Pantone, which was a very low grain black and white film back in the day. And I said, oh, I love Tri-X. And he went, oh, it's very grainy. And I go, I know, I loved it. So you had those sorts of crazy discussions with people, or if you were going to shoot a portrait, you would not shoot it in Tri-X because it's too much grain, as an example. So things like that. And in fact, Fuji, I think it was Fuji, purchased the intellectual rights to all the film stocks. So they have reproduced digitally all the film stocks. So you can take, I don't like the look of it, but you can take when I shoot, all of my work is completely, utterly neutral. There's nothing applied to it, nothing. I want a clean negative, just like I would have gotten back in the day in a real darkroom. That's what I want. That gives you the most opportunity, the most ability to impart your own vision to it, where other people will whatever. But Fuji, in fact, there's a couple of Fuji cameras, and their big selling point is you can dial in all these different film stocks, and so on. And a lot of people really like that. And there really are differences. I mean, if you run through all the different film stocks, I mean, depending upon your age, people have heard about, Kodachrome, and, you start naming all of these brand names from the day, and they all had different looks, and they all did different characteristics. Portraits were done with one film stock, landscapes with a different film stock, et cetera, et cetera. People like me loved a certain film stock, knowing its challenges, I guess you'd say, on something like Tri-X, or limitations or whatever. I just love the way it ended up looking, where someone else wanted it basically no grain, which is what Pantone is, just a very, very low ISO. And film was rated by ASA. But it's the same thing as ISO. I mean, when in the digital world, they made the conversion so that it made sense to people like me to say, oh, it's this number versus and what that number means. Basically, the higher the number, whether it's in film or on digital, the higher the number, the better light gathering capability. The trade-off is in film stock, grain, in digital, noise. Like you'll see ads for digital cameras, and it's true, they'll say, you can take our digital camera to an ISO of like 200,000 or something. You go, oh my God, my head's gonna explode. And you go, yes, and the pixels will be so big, you could print it pixel by pixel, in some cases. And so, like on my camera as an example, I have limitations on both ends. So the camera cannot shoot beyond a certain range and below a certain range. Because beyond a certain range, the introduction of noise becomes a real problem. And yes, there's software to compensate and all that stuff, but I try to work with a clean negative so that I'm putting me into it every step of the way, as opposed to whatever. It's all right.
Just one quick question on your workflow. How do you, all these prints here are from labs, I'm assuming?
Almost all of them. Some of the smaller ones I'll do.
So some of you output yourself?
Yeah.
Printers?
Well, that's a great question. And it's actually a great way of doing it. And I did this for years until I settled on two. If you, around the country, different parts of the country, there's probably 8 really phenomenal labs, in my opinion. They just do gorgeous work. But what I did for years was every year I would take, a nicely shot picture, technically competent picture, because you don't want to screw it up. You want to get a technically competent picture. It doesn't matter what it is, really. So I would take something like Bunny here, and I would send the exact same file to like 8 places. And I would get one, and you'd wait for the sales, right? Because they all have sales. And you would wait for a sale, and you would send the exact same file to like 8 places, and then you'd wait for it to come back. And then you literally you'd make notes on the back without anybody seeing. This came from this one, that came from that one, that came from that one, and so on and so on and so on. And you'd lay them out. And then you'd mix them up so you wouldn't have your own bias. And then you'd get other people to look at it, and you'd get the right setting in terms of light so that you could make you could make an honest appraisal of all of it. And then you would sit there and invariably, 2 or 3 of them would just keep coming up to the top all the time. Every year, they would be the same 2 or 3. One year you might say, well, I like that one a little better. Well, I like that one a little better. And other years you would say, oh my God, what they do. Where the bias of the printers and the quality of the printers and so on would make a gigantic difference. So and doing them that way, it doesn't cost very much at all. But there are differences. There's also a terrific, and I've used them, it's just complicated. There's a wonderful printer in Germany, but it's just complicated. Yeah, you can upload the file, but then they got to send you the thing. So I've used them, I really love them, it's not bad. So I have gravitated to California and the Midwest. There's one in the Midwest that they do beautiful work. And sometimes one lab will have a certain size and another lab won't, where you just say, well, I really need that, and they don't make that, so I either have to cut it down or I have to do something crazy, or I can go to this other place and do it just as well. So, yeah.
What's the name of the Midwest lab?
White House, White House Custom Color. They've been around a long time. They do beautiful work, just beautiful work. And you can, you get pro accounts with them, and and that sort of thing. And they one of the differences between what you would call a pro lab and a non-pro lab, frankly, is the tools available before you upload a picture. There's something, I don't want to get overly technical here, but there's something called an ICC profile. So you can download their ICC profiles, and you can look at stuff, and you can see what they're going to do and how it's going to look in general. And if you know how to read those things or read your monitor, which is a whole other issue on the workflow front of like my monitor, I have what's called hardware calibration. My monitor gets literally calibrated by me once a month, because I have a really very, very, very good monitor with a lot of zeros attached to every very. But even at that, temperature outside, humidity, whatever, it'll drift several hundred degrees a month. And the difference is like daylight is 5,500 degrees Kelvin is daylight. Well, if I set my monitor to 5,500 degrees Kelvin daylight, and over the course of, say, 6 weeks, it drifts to 6,500 degrees, you're not in daylight anymore. And so you're looking at something that really doesn't exist, frankly. And especially if you send it out and you say, well, I'm going to get a big version of this, you're not going to be happy when it comes back, because it's not going to look right. And it's going to be like, it's not our fault. So for me, part of my workflow is calibration of my basic tools, so that you know what you're looking at. Then there's a whole bunch of other things I won't get into to do as well before you do a print. But Now it's all innate in me. I mean, I don't think twice about what I have to do. But early on, it's like, what do I have to do now? What am I doing here? Why am I doing that again? Kinds of things. So, and everybody's workflow is a little bit different. And it's like, well, you do a workflow that works for you. I just keep coming back to, because people get discouraged easily, especially because when you put yourself out there, it often isn't very kind. And you either have to just say, well, we just don't mesh. I mean, I look at what I do as, it's a relationship building. I'm trying, my work is going to create or not a relationship with someone. And if it's a really strong relationship because something has really connected there, it may be a long-term relationship. They may take that home because it means so much to them. And they may not. They may just say, I don't like it, I don't get it, whatever. I mean, the whole full gambit of things. But an awful lot of people, and it's really sad, get discouraged as opposed to just don't listen to them. You got to listen to yourself in the end. You have to say, if I do a picture, and one of the reasons I like doing shows is you see in the real world in real time people's engagement or not with it. You'll see, and you'll typically see the gambit of people will look at it, pass it right by. People will look at it, stop for a minute and go, oh, okay, and then keep going. And people will just stop. And then look at it and whatever and whatever and whatever. And you go, well, it's moving them in some way. That doesn't mean they're going to walk out with it. It does mean I've made some connection there. And whether it's going to be strong enough to be a more permanent bond or not remains to be seen. But that's what, it's all human. I mean, somebody asked me recently, well, what about AI? And you go, well, it's here and it's happening, but people want to connect with people. Adobe has approached me twice to send in work for AI purposes, and I've both times refused. And I go, I know it's happening. It's not that. I'm not like trying to pretend this isn't going to happen. Of course it's going to happen. But I just go, well, that isn't what I do or what I want my work to represent. I can actually see benefits of it. I can see certain kinds of pictures where you say, well, having that in that way would be fine. I don't have the, no, you can't do it. It's like if you read the history of photography, there was a whole camp that when they went from, big 8x10 cameras that you lugged around, when they managed to have the same quality, but people went nuts. I mean, every time there was a major transition for the better, if you will, in photography, and I'm sure it's true of every medium, I just know photography, there was a group of people who were like, no, we can't do that, you can't do that. And you go, well, you're not going to stop it. You're just not going to stop it. So what about the ethics around it? What are you going to say to people? I know a photographer in Israel. His pictures are just stunning. They're untouched. That's his thing. He said, and he doesn't publish much work because most of the time it's failure, right? If you just say, I'm not touching this, so think about what you need in the way of the right conditions for that to happen. It's just extremely difficult to say, this is going to be completely pristine out of the camera. But you just go, God love you. It just shows you what you're capable of doing. I stay away from lots of software things that I don't have any qualms with. You just go for a lot of people, those are just fine. It's not for me. I would have a hard time conveying something with some of the stuff. Doesn't mean it doesn't have a place and it doesn't do a really great job. It does. It's, again, it's your own imprint in the end of what you're doing. Well, it's a little after 2, so I should stop, unless you have any last questions. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming and listening, and I hope you got anything out of it.
I love your high desert, black and white.
Oh, thank you. There's a story with that. I was in Hollywood shooting stills for a movie. And so I was doing the still work, and then there was a guy, the guy who was shooting the behind the scenes stuff, video, of how did we make this movie?